Up my net. I put the start thing and it shows here to set the net. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Innani ote subhanahu wa ta'ala amtanani wa shukri. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Li'ikhwani wati fi din. Salamu ala mani tiba huda li'ikhwani wati fi Africa, Europa, Caribbean, America, wa kuli makan. Halim wa salim bikum. Anrama to my African brothers and sisters. And we have our brother Mohammed here today. Thank you, my dear brother, for showing up. And this is a short notice, but I wanted to talk about something because I wanted to make sure we have an understanding, because we have provocateurs who are, again, trying to drive people out. I understand, too, that many people in YouTube are not even receiving my notifications either. So that goes to show you what's going on. But thank you, my dear brother, Mohammed. Appreciate it very much, my dear brother. I want to get you to a point where there was some talk and people not understanding, because again, there's a lot of people who don't want to watch any videos. They want to appear on the show and they want to talk, and that's it. And they won't let you have progression. But I figured I'll do this part before we start on the King's List, because I'm going to get you, how do we find out, like my brother here, Muhammad, how did I find out about the Fulani and the Somali people, how they're very interrelated? There's a method to this. We have the evidence to suggest this. And how do we get that? The brother asked yesterday, even though he's disrespectful, he wanted to see the hieroglyphic script. I almost laughed because hardly anybody can read it. I'm learning it. It is not easy. It is not, because it's the exact opposite of everything we've learned. And it's not easy. And not only that, trying to draw the pictures of the animals and the ornaments and so forth that are used, and learning the alphabet is no joke. But anyway, he said he wanted to see the script. None of us have the script. And I'm going to get into why we don't have it. Okay. So I'm going to get right into this so we can understand what has happened. How did we find out about our ancient brothers in Kemet? They were the West Africans. They became the East Africans. They became the Central Africans. How did we get to that point? Why is it that we're just recently discovering that we were the caretakers of Kemet? There's a reason behind that. We're going to start with this. In 300 AD, brothers and sisters, the Roman Catholic Church commissioned military to invade Kemet and destroy the suppositories, murder the priests and the mystery school scholars. It's a proven case. It's happened. The ruins, Alexandria, all the way across, they leveled, which is called the Lower Egypt, which is northern Egypt. They leveled it and murdered just about all the priests, destroyed all the schools, and then stole the documents. What was left, and I mean, some stuff they decided to take it and they sent it to Europe. And the church was realized now that they were misled by the Jewish scholars, because as they have gotten to decipher our documents that our ancestors wrote, they realize now that the Jewish scholars took those documents and compiled them and called it the Bible. And they were not happy. In order for them to get this right, they had to squash this lie. I mean, and this truth that the Africans, the Black Africans, our Somali brothers, our brothers from Ethiopia, our brothers from Ghana, our brothers from Nigeria, Senegal, Mali, Mauritania, our Amazigh brothers in the north, our Central African brothers, Bamoun brothers. I mean, all of these brothers were there. In order to stop that, they commissioned this murder. And they murdered. And he stole the documents, and he burnt down everything. So that's where we are at that point. Some of our brothers, as you heard me talk about before, knew they were going to die. So they had underground caverns where they buried documents. Those documents were unearthed to the surprise of archaeologists and so forth. They began to find all of these documents. And then they found the most important was the OT, the King's List. And our brother Muhammad asked the question yesterday when he was asking a question about how do we know where our brothers from the Senegal, how do we know where our Somali brothers were, and so forth. None of us know exactly. After doing research, after conferring, none of us know why. 5,000 years ago, we do not know. We just don't know where they actually, the towns and so forth. We do not know. We do have some evidence of perhaps where some may be for a time. But you got to remember something. We had influxes of Africans coming into Kemet. That's how we found out, and we had these different texts, and how we found out different Africans began to control Egypt. So this is how we realized that. But what cities they were living in, we cannot determine that. It's over 5,000 years ago. We just cannot determine that. But we do know that the African brothers were there, and we had their texts. And I'm gonna get into that to give you why we made the determination, how we got to the point where I know my brother Muhammad, his ancestors were in Kemet, how my ancestors Fulani were in Kemet. And some of our brothers from Ghana, the Akan and the Asante and the Ga and the Ewe, and the Mandinka and all the way across, how they were there. And I will get to that. We had what we found out, the real history is in the King's List of Egypt because of Kemet. The King's List was designed by our ancestors to give a history that will last until Yom Kiyama, okay, until the end of the earth. And so when historians begin to decipher this thing, this is what they came up with: 31 dynasties of history, the King's List, stretching from approximately now again, look at this, 4,000 to 5,500 years. So those dynasties were long, brothers and sisters, okay? And so many ancient historians, mainly from Europe at that time, said they were arranged between 330. Herodotus' number was low. Herodotus said it was 330. Others said it was 450. Some say 375, but they didn't come up with one exact number, because as each historian in the ages and centuries come, they begin to decipher, said, no, there were, 400 kings and so forth. So you can imagine now that many kings stretching from 4,000 to 500 to 5,500 years. The empire, the dynasties lasted. They translating the hieroglyphic text in monoliths and papyrus documents. This led them to make an estimate of the kingdoms. When they begin to unearth all of this documentation, they stole, uncountless wealth. You know what they've done. The Tuba nations have stole from Africa. They stole our ornaments. They stole our gold. They stole our written materials. And also they had copies of our West African brothers and their scripts, which they began to squash, especially during the colonial period. They squashed that and made us learn English, made us learn French, later German and Belgium and so forth and so on. And they made sure that our scripts that we brought from Egypt or Kemet was not going to be used. And we couldn't find the scripts. Why? Because the scripts were there in the suppositories, in the museums, in vaults, locked up in Europe. And that's how they could spin this lie. As I told you when I was a little boy, I never forget how many times I had like tears. I'm a little boy. I'm looking at someone who looks like me, a black kid, a black man in a tree with a banana in his mouth. This is what they had our history as. They knew full well this was a conspiracy, brothers and sisters, to make sure that our history would not be told. So they stole these documents and put them in their suppositories. And then they made another narrative, as they do today. Just like I told you what they say about me here. They went around here and told people, again, the thing on slavery, we weren't slaves. We came free-willed. We were stupid. We were ignorant. This is what they told people here. And brothers related many stories to me about these Tubab when they went to them and told them things like this. Because they didn't understand our history. So they went by the Tubab, and the Tubab told them, oh, they weren't no slaves. They went free will. They couldn't read and write. They had no history. They had no, and so forth and so on. So they've been doing this since practically 300 AD. So, but brothers and sisters, they had a problem in understanding the documents. Number 4, missing was their linguistic expertise and understanding of the meaning of the words, namely the names of the kings, which they butchered, in many cases deliberately transposed, because they couldn't say Yahya. See, they couldn't say that. So they butchered the name Yahya, or they'll say Yah or some other name like this in order to cover up the African dialect, because they didn't know them. And some didn't do it deliberately, but others later on did. This is the missing link, because as they translate these documents, they start seeing names like Kwese. They start seeing names, like Azikiwe. They start seeing African names that they were not familiar with, and they didn't know how to pronounce it. They didn't know what it meant. So they just started to transpose Azikiwe, Zeke, okay, Kwese, Kisi. See, they begin to butcher our names in order to take the African history, our names away, so it wouldn't be detected. Why all the difficulties? Because of the Bible, brothers and sisters. The Bible was completed 100 years. It took 100 years to transpose the OT. It took them 100 years. The Jewish scholars and some Greek scholars, they from the Meta-Neher and from the Khan languages, from the Melwi script, our Nubian brothers, and they began to put it in Greek. And it took them 100 years. And they had to take the documents and they transposed the documents. They had to add authors to the documents in order to make it look like they were the chosen people. And this is what happened. This led to all of the racial hatred and animus that is developed against the Africans. That's right, brothers and sisters. This is it. And when we talk about the scripts, the Europeans, they were in possession of our scripts. And this is what makes it even far worse. Because they had, excuse me, that's not it, that's the wrestling, excuse me, sorry, here we go. Yeah. They had written documentation of West Africans, Central Africans, and East Africans, our script that we took out of Messer. They hid it from us and said we had no writing systems. How many times you read in history about West Africans, we could only speak? First, they said we couldn't even talk. They said we were in trees, jumping like monkeys, eating bananas. We were so stupid, we didn't even know how to put houses. We didn't even know how to grow rice or anything like this. And then they said we had no writing systems. We had writing systems. They knew it. The writing systems like this, documents they found like this from the Fuller people, the Wolof, the Bassa, the Mandinka, the Compelli, Bete, Bamun. I mean, you go all the way across. They had these documents. And then they deliberately held that from us. Deliberately held that from us. And the Mende script, which was one of the most famous, which correlate very close to the Metal Neher, because again, we drift. And reason I'm going over this to show brothers and sisters, how do we get to this point? And again, I ask you and any others, we had our distractors come yesterday to try to whitewash our history. I've said all along, somebody show me the English, somebody show me the Irish, somebody show me German, Russian, Greek, which they copied a lot from us. But Romans and others, Romans and Greeks, they copied a lot from our scripts. But the others, they have no scripts like this. See, they don't. They just don't have that. And so this is a point I'm trying to make to tell you how we got to this point, brothers and sisters. And I'm going to get to this because it's important. And the Europeans held this lie. First, they had to protect the Bible because they knew now that the Bible was compiled. It was based upon African documents, not on Jewish documents, because we can never find, as you know. You know, we cannot find these documents that they used to compile the Bible. They cannot find it because it was in Egypt. This is why they cannot find it, because they used our documents. They used mainly the OT, the King's List. Especially if you look at the OT, when you begin to read it, you find the King's List. It gives you births and deaths that mirror that of Genesis. How can that be when it was written over 3,000 years before that? The Europeans now, when they took possession of these documents, they realized now that they were doped, as I said. So they had to go clean this up to make sure this lie was not going to be uncovered. They created the New Testament, gave new authors to the Bible, and ran with it. This is why they have the confusion today between the Jews and the Christians, because the Jews refuse to follow the New Testament, because he said it's flawed. And then the Christians say to the Jews, yes, we know what you've done in the Old Testament as well is a fraud. We will not follow you. See, so we have that contention between them. So when we look at this, brothers and sisters, in a nutshell, we are at the point now where this is the important time. I can't stress this, brothers and sisters. Egypt and its zenith was finished now. And I'll get into the King's List slowly, and you'll see what has happened. But now by 300, there was no such thing now as Kemet. It was finished. It had been invaded. People there, our sisters were raped. They were now supporting, European, Asian, all kind of invaders hit. So now the area was so whitened. Then our black brothers and sisters began to go further south, and they stayed there. And this was a profound situation when the Romans came in, the army came in there. You can imagine they killed just about everybody. And the church knows what has happened. It was uncovered, and I think they apologized for it, but I don't take the apology. See, so we'll leave it at that. And so now they realize that the word of God wasn't delivered to them, but to the Africans. The Europeans realize now that the divine word of God was given to us, that the Christian religion was the African one. That's why they had to kill to preserve that they were the chosen ones. Even the Europeans believed that they are chosen ones. And the modern Jews believed they were the chosen one. All artifacts, documents, and Kemet were ordered seized and or destroyed, mystery schools demolished, burned to the ground. pictures and artifacts denoting Jesus being black, seized and archived in government vaults and suppositories. This is a big one, brothers and sisters. They put this in protected, guarded sites so the public could not see it. Why do you think they did that? If it was white, as they've been trying to lead us for all these centuries upon centuries, they would have released all the documents and all the artifacts. But why did they keep them in vaults? And to his credit, Russian President Putin exposed this hideous plot and released Russia's hidden archives of what happened. And we've had black scholars went there, and what I understand, it was so compelling, many of them were in tears. They could not control themselves. Thanks to President Putin, he exposed his white brothers and told they were liars. They were killers and liars. This is why there's big contention between the West Europeans and the Americans and with the Russians. The Russians, even with the advice of the what do you call it, the Roman Church, I forgot what they call that. Anyway, they told him don't do it because they've been sitting on a lie. They themselves have what happened. They have the depictions of Jesus, ﷺ, and the disciples being black. They had documentation showing what was going on. They had all of this, and they hid it. Putin exposed it. And as I said, I heard black scholars went there, were invited there. They were almost out of control with tears because now they saw something, and they can imagine our ancestors, how they were butchered and killed and enslaved over a lie by telling us we were nothing, telling us that the Christian religion was white, that Jesus was white, Mary, ﷺ, her was white, the disciples were white, the Middle East was white from the beginning to the end, that the Kemet was white. Putin is a white man, but he couldn't stand it no more. He said, I'm going to expose this. The Americans told him, don't do it. The Western Europeans said, don't expose us. And he did. This is why they're plotting to kill him. So European scholars comprised the New Testament. They removed all African pictures and depictions, and they put them in these vaults. Brothers and sisters, you understand the conspiracy, and I'm going to get you to this point so that way you can understand. You know, I see they've come back in here, my dear brothers and sisters. They begin to remove the documents in here. I see. Oh man, these guys are something. They removed quite a few of these documents in here, brothers and sisters. Yes, okay. So anyway, they you know, you guys getting the picture, and I'm gonna get you to why we know that the Africans were the Kemites. I'll get you to that point. Again, they changed the Kemetic documents, transposed the names, created fictitious authors in the New Testament, destroyed the Sumerian. This is the other part, brothers and sisters. They not only did they kill, brothers who were, they killed their own people. They destroyed the Sumerians because the Sumerians that's why the Muslims always had high regard. They lived with us. They studied with us. We considered them not to be heretics. They believed in Jesus. He knew Jesus, ﷺ, and all the prophets of God. They didn't believe them to be God. And they were in possession of many important documents. They knew where the documents had come from. And they had to silence these people. So they began to call Samaritans heretics. And if you found them, you can kill them anywhere you found them. And they wiped just about all of them out. And this is one reason why we went to war in Andalus in the 700s, because when the Christians got the order again from the church to kill the Samaritans began to escape to North Africa where the Muslims were. And that's how we came up with 711 when the Muslims went into Andalus, which Spain today, and went in there and secured it because they had slaughtered the Samaritans. and rendered them as heretics and criminals. Then, now, fast forward to continue the lie. They commissioned in 1507, remember Michelangelo? I won't get into him, but he was commissioned to now depict Jesus from black to white, the late Islam to white. This is where we got our troubles, brothers and sisters. This fallacy and lie has been going on for a long time. In this, they commissioned slavery of Africans, giving the okay for whites to enslave Africans. Since now they're saying that we're heathens, that we had no history, we were nothing, we were monkeys. They needed to be tamed, so we had the right to enslave them. Then they instituted the white man's burden to colonize the black and brown world, which they did. They went everywhere. You know the history. They went to South America, they went to the Caribbean, and they colonized, brutalized, slaughtered, raped their way through for centuries. See, here we got our brother here. How you doing, my dear brother? Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. Thank you, my dear brother. So this was a major issue. And so then, as we fast forward, the Europeans made sure African scholars and our learned men would be barred from reviewing our own sacred texts from Kemet and other African civilizations. They made sure that we didn't have access to it. That's why they stole everything. So when me, you, or any of us start talking about our civilizations, we still have people tell us, how many you see detractors here, they laugh at us. Oh, you had nothing. You guys weren't nothing. You told me you went to Andalus. It was white men that went there. Oh, you said you did this in ancient Egypt. No, it was us. This stuff still goes on. It was orchestrated for centuries and centuries to disenfranchise us. And they made sure that our African scholars, when we began, good, learned white men began to write books, they didn't like it. And Jewish scholars too, and they began to expose this. This is why you don't hardly see their books in print. It's hard to find these books, but I found many of them. And if you want the list, and I'll give you many books that you can look at to help you to get the edification, because they came clean about what happened. Finally, they let certain African scholars were allowed to review and decipher the Kemetic texts in European sites and hidden. Now they hid this for hundreds of years from the public. They ran the lie about the Bible. They ran the lie about Kemet. They said that Kemet was white. They said the Bible, all the disciples in Jesus was white. They had all the documents. And of course, recently, Putin showed Jesus was a black man and the disciples were black. He showed the area and what happened. Some of the scholars went there. I told you they were so overwhelmed. Many of them were in tears. They were overwhelmed with what they had. It's like there was a new awakening. They found their ancestors. They finally found the documents of their ancestors, how brilliant they were, how scholarly they were, how righteous many of them were. Now they found this. And I can imagine how they felt. It's just like when I came to the African continent. It's like I can't explain to you, brothers. It's like something I entered something into the home of my ancestors. I can't explain it and how I felt. I know how our brothers felt who were invited to Russia and how profound it had to be to find out that we, our brothers, our ancestral brothers were the original so-called Christians, that our brothers were the original so-called Jews, as you've been hearing me say. And finally, African scholars were allowed to review and decipher the text. And these three brothers here is what showed up and showed out. The first two, Professor Obenga, a geneticist, historian, a Bantu linguistic expert. Check out the Historian Deluxe, linguistic expert on West African dialects. Our brother Obenga was more Central Africa. They were a tag team. Then you have Professor Dakwa. You know, as I met him in 2000. I told you I had long conversations with him. He more or less Central West African dialects because he was a Khan. So he had, the Nigerian. He had the Ife, Igbo. He had a working knowledge of many of the Central West African dialects. These brothers hit the text and they said, wait a minute. These names are written in Wolof. These names written in Akan. These names were written in Hausa. This king was Fulani. This king was Somal. This is how we came up to the points, brothers and sisters, from our extinguished brothers here, because they had access. I don't have access. None of us have access, but they had access to this. And they're experts. They begin to see Wolof, Syria. They begin to see all of these dialects. They said, wait a minute. This is our people. We have cities with the same name. Memphis in Ghana. I mean, I showed you lists here of many of the texts of different names that is equated. And we have a formula how we know it's us. And those experts right there showed out. They gave us this information. This is how we begin to find out how the Hausa were there, how the Capelli were there, how the Mende, the Mendinka were there, how the Amazigh were there. All of these Africans were there because our brothers began to translate the documents. Our European scholars couldn't do it. They translate the documents, but they start to see names Kwese. They didn't know what that, they didn't know how to pronounce that. They didn't know what it was. But Professor Obenga, he knew. Professor Darkwa know Kwese was a Ghanaian Akan name. See? And we went down the line. They began to find the Jewish documents. They start to find names like Darkwa, Barco. Barco is Akan. And they begin to find that. So they translate these documents and say, wait a minute, this is Akan people. That's how we got here, brothers and sisters. How I know what I've been saying. The brother asked yesterday, he said he wanted to see the text. I almost wanted to laugh at him, but I want to be polite. None of us have access to the King's List in its original context. There's one book here. I start to read it here where Budge, he's an expert, and he has helped us a lot to deciphering the documents. His documents, he has a lot, but he's missing the linguistic expert on West African dialects, Central African and East African dialects. He just didn't have that. But he began to mention names in there. Like one I found today, again, where he was talking about these symbols and the name Sharik. This is what the Hausa, when the Hausa were reigning. He didn't know what it meant. See, but Professor Dakwa, having a working knowledge of Hausa, knew that Sarek, if you look at it and then you look at it in Hausa, Sareka means king. And he found that the documents talking about the Sharek had to do with of the Hausa people and especially the kings. They used a symbol there. This is how we got to that point. We don't know where they were living, brothers and sisters. No, none of us know where they were living, what cities and so, because it's over 5,000 years ago. We don't know. But we know they were there by the names that they left on the King's List, which I will get into in another segment. But Professor Obenga, Sheikh Diop, all of them had access to it. That's how we got to the point. They wrote books, brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, many African Americans don't want to look at their books. They only want to look at the books written by so-called famed white scholars who are racist against us. And you even hear Professor Obenga say the same thing. Sheikh Diop, he called out many of them for putting racist literature in there. And he denounced them. Professor Dakwa, in his book, he also showed them an errors of their ways. And I've showed this book before. Just for brevity, I'll show you again. Many ask about this type of thing like this, And like the brother, when he showed out here the other day, was talking crazy and stuff like that. If you get Professor Darkwa's book here, you get this. I know many of us don't want to read what other Africans say. He's an expert. It's him who deciphered and found the Khan languages, the Hausa languages. He found the Ewe languages. He found the Fulani languages. All of this he found because he had working out. Sheikh Diop also helped him to understand some of this. Sheikh Diop, since he's from Senegal, he knew of the Fulani. He's very acquainted with the Mandinka and so forth and so on, and Seri people. He know of them. See, so this is what I was talking about, brothers and sisters. We have documentation and we have scholars that we can learn from. And they're trustworthy because they have access to the documents. When they start to look at the king's list, they start seeing the names. When you see a name, Kwese, the Budge and them knew see these names like this. They didn't know. Kwese, what is that? They didn't know. But our African brothers know the word Kwese. They know this Khan. They know Asante people. They know the Ga and so forth. They know they have these names like this. And that's how we got to this point, brothers and sisters. How do we find out about the Fulani people? How do we find out about the Somali people? Because when they translate the king's list, they start talking about the kings that came from the south. And they start talking about the people who came. They start talking about the people like the Sao people. They said they were jet black in color. They came with cattle. That's right. They came with cattle. Who runs cattle? And they came up with cattle. And they ended up going to the Middle East in time and came back to Kemet. And they became very wealthy off their cattle. But they began to mix with the elite of the Romans and Greeks who took the Sao women in particular as concubines and wives. That's how we got the Somali. That's how we got the Fulani. When the Exodus occurred, our Fulani brothers and our Somali brothers, okay, went different directions. They went different directions, brothers. Because if any one of us, we're on this African continent, and I know my brother Muhammad, if he's still here, he could tell you. There's probably people who are Fulani there in Somali. He didn't know it when they passed by. He didn't know. Oh yeah, he's Fulani. She's Fulani. He didn't know because our similarities are so great. I mean, it's difficult. See, okay, let's see where we got comments. When we get to our brothers here. How you doing, my dear brother? How you doing? Blessings. Thank you, my dear brother. This is fascinating. Do you know the spelling of the king? The teacher. Okay, excuse me. Let me put his thing there. Yeah. We had, according to who was taken over. Okay, they had different names, the Khan and so forth. I gave some lessons yesterday about names, and again, the Africans, why we're so unique, they were very deeply religious. And so when they took reigns, according to what they believed, they had Ra, Ka, Ba. You heard me say this. If you pick up Budge's book, the Book of the Dead, and some of his other documents, he talks extensively about that because it was confusing to him because he didn't understand why the Africans had this type of system. Ra, Ka, Ba. You heard me talk about Ka. The Fulani were really noted for the Ka because they were deeply, deeply religious, especially in the late 17th dynasties. I'll get to that later, but in early 18th, and everything was Ka. Names were Ka. The kings, Ka Yahya, Ka Kwese, Ka, whatever the name may be, Ka was in front of it. Our brothers, House of Brothers, names, they use Sharik as the name of king. Okay, we know that. But they use the name Yahya Ba. Okay, Muhammad Ba. We know that. And our brother Muhammad, he was talking about in the Somali language, he was talking about Ani, which I was telling you about before. Ani was used again as a designation for righteous people and kings at one time at the early stages, pre-dynasty and early parts of the dynasty, Ani. Anika, Aniba. That's right. Okay, are you taking? Yes, I'm taking questions. You, as long as those questions are germane and they're politely asked, no problem. If you differ, we have no problem with the differ. Just give us something to back up your play. Yeah, many Western Europeans tried to make Somal and all those labeled Afro as kingdom of Kush. Now, Kush was in Sudan, yes, and the Dinka, yes, brother, you got it right. We have that, and the European enemy has tried to cast the Ethiopians, the Somaliland, Eritrea as different black people. They try to say, well, they're this way, but they're Africans, but they're not really Africans, and try to confuse us. They try to put a wedge in between us, and some even accepted that. I know I was in California. I know I met some Somali brothers and sisters, and some were darker than I was, but they said that they weren't black. I won't get into that. We know what's happening, but we had Africans too who were affluent. Will tell you they're French. They're not, they're not Cote d'Ivoire. They'll tell you they're French, even though they're black as the night, but they'll say they're French over there, they're African. So we have that dynamics, brothers. You're going to find it everywhere. But you said it right. This is a true thing that the many were tried to make Somal and all of those labels Afro-Asian as a kingdom of Kush now. But they were part of that because Kush was massive, my dear brother. It was massive. And we have to look at the cataracts. I don't want to get too far ahead of that. So I'll cover that when we start to get into the King's List, because the cataracts are important, because that's a demarcation line from Kemet into Kush was the cataracts. That's important. But I'll touch on that at another segment. No way Kush have looked like people today mixed with Arabs. No, I never said that, brother. I mean, they depicted, no. If you have to go, see, the problem we have, many brothers come to the show today, but they never reviewed any of my prior talks, especially the last couple of weeks. I showed the hieroglyphics of who were Kush. They were jet black in color. You can look at those mirrors. And I was in Sudan in 2008, part 2009. I met Nuba people who are a branch of the ancient Nubians. They were black as the night, greenish tinge, bluish tinge to their skin. So you have to look at my other tapes because I showed that. Now other Nubians went further north and became the Somal, became the Ethiopians, became the Fulani people. We know this, the beat. We estimate this, but the Nubians, many of the branches didn't mix much. The hieroglyphics and OT mentions this fact that the people down south, okay, in the lower cataracts didn't mix. That's right, they didn't mix. Very interesting. The Fulani have many names for kings. Okay, now yes, but that's later in the 1400s. Yes, later on, even in Songhai, many different. Yes, that's a true statement. But in ancient times, there was no such thing as Fulani. They were not known as that. When the Fulani people became, we according to Professor Dakwa and Sheikh Dab, he was trying to estimate that the Fulani periods of their strength was between the 16th dynasty. I know it don't make sense by dynasty, but I'll cover that later, another segment. 16th to about the 21st were Ramses, because there's a thing that Sheikh Diab found of one Fulani type person is belonging to Ramses' family. And you know how the Fulani and the Somal people in particular, where they braid their hair, especially our sisters, and the ornaments they put, our Kush brothers, our Nubian brothers didn't do that because they didn't have that kind of hair. Their hair was super curly and they were jet black. But this picture here shows a light brown skinned individual, okay, with braided hair, with ornaments in it, and a certain style across the head. This is what our sisters the Fulani sisters do this, and our Somali sisters do the same thing. And our Ethiopian sisters, we have shared culture. And hopefully I'll get that picture to you so you guys can look at it. It's very interesting. Even he put in the caption, this was a Fulani type person around the 21st dynasty. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let me see here where our brother here. Okay, where we at here? Okay, here. Okay, our brother here. Yes, how you do? Thank you. Yes. Now, if you guys want to ask questions among yourselves, I have no problem. But you know, we Africans, we must keep decorum. Be kind to your brother, even if you disagree with him politely. No problem. You guys ask questions. Make sure you greet one another. We are Africans, okay? We're not Europeans. We're Africans. We greet, especially Muslims. We're supposed to greet each other. But even you, Hebrews, you're supposed to use Shalom Aleichem. So you're supposed to do it because that's what Jesus ﷺ did. Okay, I think they were same camp, but we say pharaohs, not. Yes, they use the word pharaohs. That was yes, but there's another. You know what? I got to pull it out of my notes. There's another name that they use for king too. A pharaoh is a name also, but it was corrupted by the Greeks. There's another name that they used a lot, especially in the 8th to the 15th dynasties. They changed this name, and the name changed later when the Nubians came back. My ancestor Shabaka, Pianke, Charaka, they changed that. They didn't use pharaoh anymore. They used Negos, which was part of Giz. Negos, that's what they used, okay, as one. And then there was another word that they also used. But we found out too, our Nubian brothers who came to reunite, to drive out the Tubal from the north, they began to adopt the old names of their ancestors. As you heard me say yesterday, Orsorta Sin, who we know the Sin people are where? In Senegal and whatnot, right? We know that's the name he had. Taharka said that was his ancestor. See, so I'm giving you this, brothers and sisters, for your discernment today, and I'm hoping that you guys take it, run with it, and do your research or label. Yes, and you know, yes, there's a lot of labels now that we all have. Okay, we have many labels that we have. Okay, and we have the people off the Nile. But to be honest with you, my dear brothers, the Akan is he was around the Nile, wasn't he? Okay. Our brothers, House of Brothers, because they were in camp, he was around the Nile also, wasn't he? Around the Nile in English. Our Siri brothers, our Mandinka, our Wolof brothers were where in camp? They were around the Nile. So how do we differentiate Nileolithic? See, this is creation, again, to separate us. All the West Africans, the Capelli, you've seen the scripts, all came out of camp. All of us was around the Nile, because the Nile is the breath, the backbone of the East. No doubt. Even we as Muslims know, Subhanahu wa ta'ala said this river was created by Subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he created these cataracts, it was in the mind. And as you heard me talk about the cataracts, how we got these cataracts, what's the name, why and how many cataracts are on the Nile? There's 6. And how we got, these cataracts and so forth and so on. It's an interesting story. See, and all times, think about this, brothers and sisters, 5,000 years or more, the Nile still have fish in it. Now, tell me if this is not from Subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you would think by 5,000 years, it would be fished out. But we've been living in this area over 5,000 years, and the fish are still running and biting, okay? It's an easy fishing ground. And I've had to fish I could never get enough of it. Especially this one fish they catch real close to the bank. I can't think that when I was in Sudan, I can't think we call it in Arabic. I can't. I was crazy about this. I had to have this 4 or 5 times per week, especially when they barbecued it. I don't want to talk about food, but I was in love with this particular fish, beautiful. And then they had the hot sauce. Then they took there was herbs that they grow naturally off the Nile, and you eat that, good for digestion, constipation, and so forth and so on. It was interesting, but I love the fish coming from the Nile. Very interesting. I loved it. So my answers are probably much more like the Sudanese people in appearance. Yes, yes, especially what we have in the north and to the west. Now, when you start going to the east, this is where it gets complicated. Excuse me, to the west. This is where it starts to get complicated because many other Arabs who came from Jazira Arab began to come into the region. They settled in the western Darfur region, right? Guess who else made their trek there? The Fulani. So you have Fulani people come, you had Arabs from the Middle East come, you have Black Africans who were already there, and not the Nuba. Some of the Nuba people begin to mix, but not much. But there were other Blacks, and they mixed. That nucleus of people, they begin to call them Fulani Arabs. They had other names for them. They became the RSF that is fighting today in Sudan. That's why we have the complications of Sudan. The Sudan question is, who is the real Sudani and who is Arab? You heard my class talk about that. I was there in 2008, 2009. I did extensive study and talking to people, looking at documents. And I was flabbergasted what I learned there. People were Black, everybody's Black, but I couldn't marry this person over here because they said I was more like the Arabs, so I couldn't marry the Nuba. I mean, it was crazy. Okay, it was crazy. And I asked questions. I asked Nuba people. I said, hey, what if I got my son over here and he wants to marry your daughter? He said, no, you guys are Arabs. You go marry, you have to marry among the Arabs. It was crazy, but this is what happened. Shame at the Ancient Kemets is in civil war. Yes, that again, brothers and sisters there. They said they killed more people there in Sudan than they did in Gaza, but no one talks about that in the news. They said over 150,000 have been slaughtered in Sudan, and it's really a shame. And I'm sorry to that this happened. Depict themselves in a way. They did not look like the. Yeah, brother, we have discussed this already. You're doing like the current Somali. Yes, yes, we already said that. Again, if you go back and look at my previous talk about this, I showed the picture of the brothers from Kush, the Nubian people. They were jet black in the hieroglyphics. The Kemetic people of Kemet did depict them as jet black. I have one mural that I have there where it shows variety of complexions. You show the Nubians jet black. Then they show other ones who are very black, and then the other ones are light brown skin because they begin to move south, getting away from the Romans and the Greeks. So we do know that happened. We have their depictions of themselves. Yes, and again, like I said, we know the Nubians were jet black. There was no doubt about that. And the descendants are still jet black today, as I attest to when I saw them there in Sudan. Okay, the Khan say they came from Kush in their oral history. Yes, well, yes, the Khan people reached all the way into the dynasties of Egypt because Professor Dakwa, when he translated documents, began to find Akan names like Kwese. Okay, he's beginning to find names that are very germane to the Ghanaian area we understand today in the Akan language. He found names related to the Ga language as well. I gave a class on that. I showed documentation of names that are very similar. And matter of fact, brothers and sisters, let me see here. We got here. I want to get these brothers, and I'm gonna get back. Wonder if Arabs would ever accept. No, they won't. You see my hesitation? There's none. They will not accept that. And even 99.9% of Europeans will not. 99% of the Latinos will not accept that. 99.9% of the Asians live in Asia will not accept that. We even have maybe 75, 80% of even Black Africans won't accept that either. See, And I've told you about many stories. I've given evidence, and it was, yeah, man, this is right on. But I go back to that guy's house 3 weeks later, I still see Jesus Islam being blonde hair and blue eye, and they won't take it down. They believe it's so sacrilegious. They feel there's some power behind a picture of a white Jesus, so they won't remove it, because they feel if they remove it, they're gonna be cursed. We've had Africans here believe that, and African Americans too, in the United States. And it's a shame. Yes, exactly. You're right, and that's why they are not true believers. Yes, it's funny, the contradictions that are in even the New Testament, because Jesus said that I was here to enforce the Torah. So if you follow Jesus, we know that Jesus said what? That woman, the woman, Jewish woman, Hebrew woman, whatever you want to call her, she's supposed to be covered like the Muslim woman. The Christian and Jew, when he goes to the synagogue or to the church, is supposed to make ablution, because that's what all the prophets did. Like the Muslims, we wash hands, feet. If you use the bathroom, the private parts, we take shower, we purify ourselves so we can go make our prayer. This is what the prophets did. But the Christians and Jews today don't do that. So who are they following? Because Jesus said, I'm here to enforce the Torah, not to tear it down. Jesus never authorized anybody to eat pork. It's against the Torah, but people eat pork. Jesus, see, I'm enforcing the Torah. Fornication was out. You know that they stoned people in those days. And the Muslims still do it in Sharia-based cities and states and stuff, but there's not many that do this now. But in northern Nigeria, I know they still do some of this. But these are the laws. People say, no, you can have as many women as you want. Jesus Islam did not say that. See? So these are sore issues. The Ethiopian Judaism looks very Islamic. Yes, made that Islam. No, it didn't come from that, my dear brother. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ received his revelation. And because he was unlettered, he could not read and write. He had Muslim brothers scribe for him to jot down exactly what was told. You notice when you read the Quran, you find it totally different than that of the Bible. Totally different. Totally different. And he even talking about the creation. And we were given evidences and miracles that Subhanahu wa ta'ala finally revealed that was not answered by the previous prophets. I'll give you some, and this is not Islamic, but I'm going to give you this to kind of clear this up. We talk about the oceans. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this information to a prophet, Allah Islam. You go to South Africa, down to the tip at the lowest, at the very last tip of South Africa before you get to the ocean. There's the Atlantic, right? And there's the Indian Ocean, I believe it is. The Indian Ocean Pacific, or Indian Ocean. They don't mix. Nobody had this answer and even knew this prior to that. But Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a revelation, and he gave all this knowledge to our Prophet Islam. They don't mix. Modern science found that the oceans don't mix. I don't know why that is. But my teacher in Ghana told me one time, he said, the mysteries such as this is better served by leaving it alone. That's what he used to tell me. I told people about what he said to me. I wrote down what he said, and I gave it to in a class about these issues, about the mysteries of the earth, by leaving things alone, because you cannot answer it. See, so that's one. And then he said too, the stream, like when I was in Abzome in Ghana, there was a beautiful stream that ran through the village. One of the most prettiest villages I've ever seen in my life. Very tall, 30 meter, 40 meters, some 20, 25 meter palm trees, and stuff like that. And they would go get the coconuts and stuff like that for me, because it's so hot to the east. People went to the eastern part of Ghana. It's much warmer than it is in Accra. Very, very hot. And the little boys always run up to trees to get me coconuts to drink. But there was a stream that ran to the ocean. Our prophet said that the fresh water doesn't mix with the salt water. In modern sciences, they found this to be the case. They don't mix. So these are what I'm saying, that Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave our final prophet something that the other ones did not have. But Subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us also we don't make no distinction between the prophets. We don't make distinction. We don't say Prophet Muhammad was better than Prophet Jesus, or Jesus was better than Prophet Muhammad. No, we don't do that. It's against us. Okay, I'm against that type of thing. He says don't make distinction. So we don't do that. So I wanted to give you that so that way we could understand. Maybe it was all over the East. I don't know what you mean by that. Vice versa, Judaism came from Islam. No, Judaism was not, because the prophets that came before were given different missions than that of Prophet Muhammad. So we had differences, but we have very similar laws, of course, to the Sharia, like fornication and so forth and so on. But we had differences in many of the different things. Moses said his religion is Judaism. I don't, according to what we know that's written in the hieroglyphics, Moses, salam, and if you saw my class in Medet Neher, the name Moses is M.S. Okay. We know that in the Pyramidic the old OT, right? The King's List, Moses is mentioned, is there. The history of Egypt is there, but he is known as MS, Mas. That's then Mental Neher. This is in the language of ancient Egyptians. Okay, that's what Moses' name was. But it's also, I gave a class on this. I won't get deeper in it because I already gave a class on this. There's another name also that they used for that when the vowels came in. So now this is how we came up with Moses, Moises, and so many other names like this because they added vowels. But the original Mental Neher, there was no vowels. So Moses was Mes. See, so that I just wanted to get that out there to you. Musa never said his liver. That's right. He never said that because that can't be, because Musa was not Jewish. He was not Hebrew either. See, he was not. And so he didn't say that. But the tenets and stuff that was practiced, they finally did label that, as you heard me in my class, talking about the Africans who went into Europe, came across, the Europeans called them Jews and Hebrews. That's how this Hebrew question came into play. And I gave a class on that. I won't get deeper into that. You have to view the film. Islam was the reaction by Jews and other natives in Africa to the invasion of Arab. No, brother, wait a minute here. No, no, we're all one. Yes, it was a reaction. No, brother. See, again, Islam came about because the Jewish prophets said they were alerted, because there was a class of Jewish scholars who had the questions of prophethood. They knew, like one was a Samaritan, and I gave this story already. If you look at in my class, I talked about it. I won't get deeper into that because it's not fair, because we have this to cover. But anyway, I'll get a little bit and give you some. The Samaritan scholar had from John the Baptist, we know him in English, right? Yahya in Islam. He was given the answers about prophethood. And so there's questions and there's also a physical characteristic. They found this. The Jewish scholars questioned Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about his prophethood because they were told they was coming among the Arabs. That's how that came about. He answered the question only the prophet would know. And the prophet would have to convey with Subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he's not a prophet, he cannot be a prophet if he doesn't have that pipeline to Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he asked Subhanahu wa ta'ala what the answer was. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the answer, and it was right. The scholar of the Samaritan who first saw Muhammad, he said, John the Baptist said, you would know him by a mark on his shoulder. The mark was there. So it's very interesting. The Arabs here mean outsider. not Islamic. No, it's the Arabs. That comes because of the black people who were original, and they were labeled Arabs, meaning they were dwellers in some of the desert. And of course, the Arabs we know today are mainly white, but the original Arabs we know were black. So that's not quite it. Okay, brothers and sisters, let me get into something here, and then I'll be getting here. I think we are here at this point. Okay, now we had a brother that showed out the other day. He was talking. He said he wanted me to present the script and show this and that. I cannot do that. None of us have access to all of it, but we did have our esteemed scholars, Diop, Obenga, and Darkwa from Ghana. They did have access, and these gentlemen gained access to the text, learn from the translations, the linguistic connection between the present-day West Africans, Central Africans, and East Africans. That's how we got to this point, brothers and sisters. If our brother who was on me yesterday talking crazy, if he had waited, but he couldn't. And he wanted, I don't think he was member of our club as Black Africans. I don't believe he was. I believe he was a tuba portraying himself as an African. But now you have how we came up with this. We have experts. When they begin to translate the documents, as you heard me say, even Budge said he did not understand some of the names of the people. But when our esteemed scholars got it, he said, wait a minute, Kwese is from the Khan name. See, Barco, we know, comes from a Khan. We know Sharik is Hausa, meaning king. This is how we came to that point to know that the West Africans, Central Africans, East Africans were the original people of Egypt. This is how we finally linked Black Africans to ancient Kemet. We cannot determine after 5,000 years where all of the West African, Central Africans actually reside in Kemet, because they moved here and there. You talk about 5,000 years. They moved here, they moved there. We know that we were there because of the kings, and that's why we have the kings list. We don't know exactly where all of the communities were living. We do not know. We know many, by the 19th dynasty, began to move back south to get away from the Romans and the Greeks. We know that. But we use a formula to determine how Black Africans were actually Kemetic, West Africans, Central Africans, etc. That, brothers and sisters, is a key. Because in order for us to understand that, we had to have a formula. You know what? I don't see my notes here for that. Now, shame on me for that. I had everything. I must have put those notes there. I have to get that into another time. But there's about a 5-point about culture, languages, and so forth, and parents, and all this. This was used, and this is how we came up with this particular thing. And I'm saying we were at 5, 6, I think it was. Okay, yeah, okay. Now we are 6. Okay, you know, I'm missing 2 of them, and they removed because I had them here. That's the Sar Kings. Okay, well, that's okay. I'll go all the way here, and then because we're getting long here, I'm getting close. Armed with this information, this is the other fact. You know, the computer didn't like me to use traditional African names. Delia is not his name, and it changed it when I put, you know, his name there. It changed it. But anyway, armed with this information, our esteemed scholars took this, and they were invited to 1974 UNESCO conference on ancient Kemet. There, the commission tackled age-old problem of determining the race of the Kemetic peoples, where they destroyed them, brothers and sisters. They destroyed all of the white racists and all of the things that, that they used to say the Kemet was white. Our esteemed brothers showed them by one melon test that Sheikh Diop developed. Showed they took the mummies, royal mummies, and they developed a number system for melon. The low number meaning that they were white. High, medium to high number, we know they were Black people. The royal mummies all had high numbers because Herodias himself said that they were jet black in color. Remember that, what he said when he visited there around the 4th and the 5th dynasties. He talking about jet black people he saw, and that's what he called them. The commission tackled that problem. They came in there and destroyed the Egyptologists, the so-called experts, and convinced the commission that Kemet was in Black African civilization with African-related linguistics and cultural traits. This is why the brother was screaming and yelling yesterday about this stuff. I was trying to get him to wait. He didn't want to. He wanted this to get at me and start talking. He didn't say. He said I was doing this about history. He never looked at any of my tapes. He just came on and he said he didn't want to listen to me no more. I said it's fine. But now you understand where we got to the point. How do we determine that the West Africans are there? Because our esteemed scholars wrote books and they begin to decipher the documents for us. And they begin to tackle how we came up with Mendi, how we came up with the Mende, how we came up with Mendinka, how we came up with Siri, how we came up with the Sen people, which my cousins who are in Senegal and Gambia with the last name Sen. I have cousins with Sar. All these were kings there in Kemet. We have Akan kings. We have Fulani kings. We know they used the word Ka, was translated. That's how they knew. Because why? Sheikh Job from Senegal, very committed to the language of Senegal. Some is for full day. So he was well aware of that. He began to find the documents and said, wait a minute, this is the Fulani people. Then he was convinced after he saw one mural of one person, a woman that was in it with, the way the Fulani woman, in yesteryears, how they braid their hair. Remember, they put this ornament around too and whatnot. He found that. This was 3,000 years before. So that's how we came up to this point. This commission stayed in secret for decades because, again, we go back to the same thing, brothers and sisters. They showed it was African. So they kept this conference quiet. And then the distortion of African and Kemet history was laid to rest, but we know it still continues today because people don't know about this conference. People don't know about these books that we're talking about. The people don't know about the Sar kings and so forth and whatnot we're talking about here. They don't know about that because they don't know how to translate those documents. And when they do translate the documents, when they see the word Quese, they don't know what that is. So they say it's Greek, or they say it's Latin, or they say it's Italian. It's not. It's Akan. See? And our African brothers gave us this information because they reviewed these documents and so forth and so on. The titles, again, he said, this brother yesterday was on it. He said, this is wrong. If you look at Budge's book, The Book of the Dead, he talks about this. He talks in length about Ka and Ba, how this relationship with Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and with the earth and with the heavens, but the soul and what happens in the after death. This is crucial. See, and we know that the Ka was a title name. We know, again, Sin, as you heard me say yesterday, the Sin people are where? In Senegal today. They're in the Gambia also, and they're part of Mali. And we know that, and we know the kings had this name, especially in the first three dynasties, Sin, then also the Sar. See, so we have all this documentation. I'll get to you, brothers. Just hold on. I'm just trying to get this point here. This is the picture of our brother, if he's still here. I was talking about one of these pictures here. You see a black-skinned Nubian, and you see now other blacks who came from the north, but they're like modern-day African Americans, you know what I mean, and stuff like that with this type of color because they have mixed. But you see different shades of black folk there. They were in the South. See, so so we have this evidence, and I wanted to prove something, point to you guys. The linguistics. This is important too, brothers and sisters. When our African scientists begin to do this, they begin to find these languages. So they begin to lump them, they knew. And then they begin to surmise because they look at the documents. You see all of these names here. It's related. This is how I got to the point we know that the West Africans, the Central Africans, and the East Africans were the real original Egyptians. So this is the languages that they found in the hieroglyphics. This is very interesting, brothers and sisters, because it took the Africans to look at the names. Quese, they see the name Barco, they see the name Sharik, meaning king in Hausa. They start seeing all this in the hieroglyphics. They knew these languages belonged to West Africans. And they know that the cities, that we have same cities in many West African towns they got from Egypt. We know that. We know the valley, that's Sin Valley in Senegal. We know the Sin Valley is then in Kemet. We know that King Shabaka, my ancestor, the people who were Amazigh left, they went to Algeria. What do they call their country? Shabaka. Isn't that interesting? And in Morocco, again, because the Shabaka people also use the word Shabeka, meaning, again, the same. Shabeka, it was also another term they said meant for king. You find this in Morocco, because when they came from Egypt, this is, again, how many of our ancestors, they took the names from where they were and they began to use it in West Africa and North Africa. Shabaka, they used in Algeria and also in Morocco. We know the Sin Valley, they still use it. They used it to Syrian people in Senegal. We have that. Memphis, you know the name Memphis. You heard me say this there in Egypt. We know in the hieroglyphics is Memphis. Where we find Memphis, we find it where? Among the God people there in where? In Ghana. See, so all this evidence, brothers and sisters, that we have, again, the names. This is why the formula that we use, brothers and sisters, our African scholars begin to look at these documents and they say, wait a minute, look at these names. We have these names in Senegal, the Mende, Mendinka, and Wolof. Here you go here. You heard me a couple of weeks ago talking about this, about the similarities. Here it is. Fari is another name, brothers and sisters, for king. I forgot. One brother in the chat asked for that. I'm hoping he's still here. Fari is the name, that's the other name that was used by the ancient Egyptians, our black brothers, for Pharaoh. We know that. Mary also is a name that was used, meaning Africa. Okay, at one time we knew that this name Ta Mari. Then again, brothers and sisters, remember the prefixes and the suffixes. Remember that? Ka, Ba, Ta, Sin, Sar. All of these we use. That's why we know this is African. This is some of the here is showing you these similarities. Yoruba, our brothers in Yoruba are our Yoruba brothers. Now we look at this, the connection. Again, I know it's a small script because I'm taking from our African brothers book and so forth and so on. And I have a whole list of books that you can learn from. And you see the names here, how they're related. Egyptian and Yoruba. How can we have the similar and same names if we are not the same people? It's impossible. You take these scripts and marry it up to English. Take these scripts and marry it up to Latin. Take these scripts and marry it to Spanish or Russian or Yugoslavian or Slav or any other language. There's no similarities. But the Africans' dialects, similar identity in language, similarity identity of religious beliefs, similarity identity of religious ideas and practices, survival of customs, names of persons. Again, we go back to names of persons. Kwese, Kwese. We have this name, ancient Egypt. Kwese is there. It's a Khan. See, we know that. This is what they're talking about here. So all this, brothers and sisters, I'm giving it to you so you can see how we got the Yoruba name. It was originated in where? Egypt. That's how we got the name Yoruba. It came out originally from Egypt. And I gave a class about this as well. Let me give you the other one here. We have how Yoruba was formed. They took, again, the prefixes Ye and again the Neher Rap, and it equaled Yoruba. This is how the Yoruba people came up with the names. This is in ancient Egypt, brothers and sisters. So now you understand why you hear me say this. I'm giving you the proof now. Our brothers did their work and their job. Now let me get to some of the questions here, and then I'll be closing. Okay, we got. Let me go find where I left off. Arabs. Okay, yeah, I think we're here. Let me get out of the here. Okay, no one in West Africa accepted Islam by the sword. You're right. That's not the case. That's the case. The Fulani people received it in the Sahara, and they came across, and because they were in their caravans, they began to convert the people all the way to, they got to the Takra region of Senegal. We know this, and it wasn't by the sword. Islam spread by word of mouth because they start to watch the people and their cleansiness and their religious fervor, and they came to Islam not by the sword, because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala tells us in the Quran that he does not want no one pushed into compulsion to accept Islam. It's forbidden. It is strictly forbidden for a Muslim to force another to accept Islam. We cannot do our mother and father, even our children. We cannot force them. That's against the Sharia law. So where are we at here? Yeah, we got here. Our brother here. Okay, I'm trying to. I don't want to make sure. I want to make sure I got everybody. Well, Western European classified so-called Afro-Asian languages Kushite. No, brother, that's not the case. We don't even know the language of Kush. Yes, we have. They call it Marrow, but there's another name for it. And Sheikh Diop and them, they translated this document that they because nobody could translate it, but they found a key to translate it. Professor Obenga translated the document, and that's how we begin to learn this script, because they had their own language and script. We know that. So Professor Diop and Professor Obenga, they began to break it down and they translate that. So we know that. You saw my writings here earlier that the so-called Semitic languages are all related. We all know that they came out from Africa. They didn't originate in the Middle East. That's what people want to believe, but it's not the case. It originated out of Africa, and we know that for a fact. Truth, and here we got okay, Kitab has the best version of Book of the Dead. Oh, that's okay. That's good to know. Thank you, my brother, for telling us that. I didn't know about that. That's pretty good. I know one African brother was talking about the Book of Dead. He said that Budge, I heard this too. Budge made a lot of mistakes. Again, we got to understand something. These are Europeans, and they weren't living around Black Africans. Yes, they came to Kemp and so forth and so on, but they didn't go past certain cataracts, right? They didn't go into the Sahara, into the southern, into West Africa and so forth and so on. They didn't go there. So when they saw the names like Kwese and stuff like this, they didn't know what this was. They didn't know if it was a river or a tree or a place. They didn't know. They just didn't know. See, so this is why this big gap happened. But our African brothers start saying, they say, Kwese, wait a minute, this is Akan. See, and that's how we got to that point. Okay, some have made point that I cannot worship the power behind the sun, not the sun. That's right. We have people who said that it was sun worship. It's not. He brought back monotheism, and again, we're raw. The Europeans, because since the Europeans been taken away from Egypt, now everything's pagan. But before that, they didn't say that. It's funny. When they claimed that Egypt was theirs, they didn't talk about paganism. But suddenly now they start to realize that we found out their lie. And so now everything's pagan again. So they switch things around. Oh, Ra means sun worship. Not necessarily. Ra means what's behind that. What sanctions the sun is what is being worshipped. See that, and you got this part right. And that's why the Europeans, because now they've been thrown out, so now they start to put everything pagan now. But when they were running things, they said, when everything was them, they didn't talk about it. They talked about how powerful the civilization was, how great it was, how this and that. But now since we've said, hey, you're a lie, man. Egypt was never yours. It was ours. Oh, yeah, you guys, that's right. Now you was pagan worshiping, this and that. The religious Tubab are like this. It's unfortunate. I might have skipped over some brothers here. I hope I didn't skip over. Okay, let me see here. The Judah after man. Abraham would not have followed religion named after his grandson, the grandson of Judah. Okay, now our brother Dakwa, the Ghanaian scholar, my understanding, my brother, I met him in 2000, had lengthy conversations with him. I heard he passed on. He talks about this saga of Abraham. And he broke down the language, and he broke down the relatives of Abraham. And it's in his book. If you look at it, you rewind it, I showed his book. I've showed it many times, many shows. I urged, some brothers said they did get it, and they were amazed at the scholarship in it. We should start reading our own scholars, what they have to say about our own history, because he broke down and told about how the Bible was not written by the whites. I mean, it was not written by the whites, it was written by us. It's our beliefs. See, and so this is important. I talk about in never the word Moses means MS. We know that. Moses never had okay. Yes, so we look like we just about cover everybody. Oh, no, excuse me. I'm sorry. You know what? Oh boy. Let me see. I missed some. Okay. I will. Some book resource like you. Okay. Yes. Let me give you. I don't like to use email too much, but I don't know my escape. Let me give you something so you guys can see this. If you need to get a hold of me, I can give you a book list of books that I've studied over the past, and these books are absolutely stunning. They're good books at outlook.com. And you guys can get a hold of me there and whatnot. And okay, what do you think of the European linguistic classification of Bantu? I don't follow what they say about that. They have some linguists who've studied among the Africans. We believe those, and there's very far between. But we have a lot of them who are racist. I give you an example what I'm talking about. We have one man who made millions off the doggone people. Remember the doggone people who are in Mali? I got some heritage with them as well. They're the ones who use the Fulani dialect to chart the space, okay? The interstellar space. They use the Messina dialect. This guy is the name I threw out his book after I can't think of his name. He made millions off his time when he lived around the doggone people. He turned back around and said that the doggone people were generally Europeans because of their scholarship. And he said, then he finally said in page 202, I think it was, that these whites mixed with river Negroes. See, so I don't hold too much weight on what many of them say. It seems arbitrary to me. Even some of the Westerners are starting to acknowledge that. Yes, again, Professor Obenga is an expert on Bantu languages, but I don't speak French. My wife does. He has a book written talking about the Bantu languages, but he wrote it in French. It hasn't been translated that. And it's a very interesting book, brothers and sisters. Very interesting book. He links the Kemetic languages that was used with the Bantu. He linked that. Very good book, but I don't read French, but I have somebody to translate for me. And that's how I learned about some of that. We have this here, how Western Europe classifies so many. Yeah, okay, I guess we got that part. I want to make sure I got everybody here. I want to make sure we got everybody acknowledged here. Arabs, not as, okay, Arabs, Armenian, outsiders. Okay, we talked about that, except about the sword. Yes, Islam did not start with Prophet. It says he probably, all of them were Muslims. Yeah, the prophets, okay, the prophets were all under Tawheed, and we had different names for them. And Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that he said these people who followed the earlier prophets like this are not disbelievers, they are believers. He said that. And he said that in many, many areas of the Quran, making sure that the Muslims understand that when their ancestral brothers were following Abraham, John the Baptist, some of the prophets of old, and Yusuf alayhi salam, and so forth and so on, they're not disbelievers. They're not polytheists. They are essentially Muslims. See, so you do have that part right. All of them were Muslims following Islam. You had that because it was submission to Subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they believed in that. No doubt, you got that part right. You got it right. Said I can believe in one did. Yes, that's true. He believed in that. But now we have scholars coming back again, trying to tear up because they've been systematically rolled out of Egypt. So now they're trying to find things to make everything pagan again. But it's funny, when they said everything was white, you didn't hear nothing about paganism. But suddenly now they've been thrown out, and it's been determined that most likely the Kemets were black. Now everything's pagan. That's how they work. But we know that not all were under monotheism. We know that. because we have periods, and that's why we've been spanked, even in Africa today. Why are we in trouble? Because we have relied on other things other than Allah. We took even governance and finance from disbelievers. And Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, he has hell waiting for them. That's what he says in the talking about democratic people, ways, means, and disbelievers that we follow. We follow their systems, their governance, their financial systems. That's why we're in trouble today. And that's why you heard me say, I don't want to follow them, because I don't want to be on day of judgment where they come to testify against me. I don't want that. See, and Subhanahu wa ta'ala made a big point about that in the Quran. Seriously, we know about the Arab slave trade, the only way that they escaped slave. Yeah, that's a different subject, brothers, because that happened later. We know that they were involved, but Black Africans in West Africa were also involved in slave trade. We know that Amazigh people in the north were involved in the slave trade. Not only that, they had white slaves too. They raided ships and took slaves, and also they bought slaves, white girls, and they have brokers from Italy and places like this who actually sold their women to Black kings of Morocco. We know that. See, we know that. And we know they took white slaves. All the way up into the 1800s, they had white slaves in Morocco. And finally, they were given their freedom, and they were determined, they were given basically Moroccan citizenship and so from so on. And they began to mix with the population. That's why in the 1800s, the Amazigh people, the Blacks, when the infusion of all the Europeans, the Black Moroccans begin to go back south again. The same thing like happened in Egypt. And then they begin up in the north to mix. That's why you see the Amazigh people today in Morocco look in the way they do. Many of them are very, very, very pale of skin, greenish, eyes, blondish hair. You'll have that. You'll see that mixture. That's why that is. No, excuse me. We're almost finished here. Okay, true. I think it seems that fallen leaders hated him because he went. Yeah, again, they hated him, and I'll get into the King's List because this is a part talking about, again, I want to give you something. Akhenaten, his name actually was in Akan. Akhenaten is his name, not Akhenaten. This is the Greek version of the name. But nevertheless, he worshiped Subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, bottom line, he worshiped Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why what the exodus of the so-called Jews and Hebrews, this was a catalyst. But I'll get into that when we get into the section of the King's List. See, I don't want to get too ahead of the story there because the Exodus is not as simple as you may think. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting. I will play some book research. Okay, yes, as I said, I gave you brothers and sisters. Okay, what do you think? Okay, we talked about that. Let me put this on screen again. You guys saw in my I don't know where my thing, I put it there. I put my email address. You guys I can give you some books that you can follow, that you should follow if you're interested in learning about your ancestral brothers of ancient Kemet, because there are some outstanding books, especially of our African brothers who wrote the books, because it's them who have the linguistic expertise. It's not the Europeans. Some Europeans have mastered it because they studied and lived around the Yoruba and so, and they even themselves begin to marry up the ancient Egyptian ways and customs and language to that of Yoruba. As you see, I showed you the correlation between Yoruba and the ancient Kemet with names, customs, and so on. So now, brothers and sisters, we have the understanding why your brother said that Kemet was West African, Central African, and East African brothers. That's right. Now you understand that. How we got to that point, now we understand where it came from. See, but I know I'm going to get distractors again who will come back and tell the same story again. Well, I want to see all the hieroglyphics. You're going to have to show me all this. You know now that only selected Africans were allowed to even look at the King's List. And the Europeans control that. See, the Europeans control all the papyrus documents, like the hymn of Osiris, the hymn of Ra and all that. They have those documents. They stole those documents from Egypt. See, and then they hid it from the public. Again, the European scholars knew the Black history. That's why they put these things in guarded vaults so the public could not see them. But it was Putin who finally opened up his to show the true part, what he saw in the Middle East. I mean, what they had. They had murals, pictures, documentation about Jesus was a Black man. And that upset a lot of Europeans, the Americans too. The Vatican, the Vatican was they urged him, don't do it, because the Vatican, they've been sitting on documents. They have documentation. It's them who ordered the murder of our African brothers in late 300 AD to go and kill them and steal their documents. And they did. And they killed our brothers, every last one of them. And then I'm talking about our scholars burned their suppositories, took many of thousands upon thousands of documents, but our brothers knew they were being killed. They buried many of these in caverns and stuff, like caves and small caves, and they buried these documents, a lot of them. That's how we got these documents today, brothers and sisters. It's very interesting, but very tragic. So I gave you this lesson today, my dear brothers and sisters, to help you. I see it says new message here. Okay, where we got here. Okay, let me see. The idea of African paganism was unfounded. Yes, has zero evidence. No one can give evidence outside of European propaganda. Yes, and the Europeans determined what is paganism. Now it's funny. In England, when they were painting themselves blue and eating raw meat, and they actually was living in caves, because the climate there's cold, 7-8 months of the year, especially in England, and so on and so on. And the Vikings wrote extensively about them. They called them savages. Now, this is what they called the Englishmen when they came across the Vikings. When they came across, they called them savages and so forth and so on, eating raw meat, living in caves. They didn't take baths. This is all documentation they wrote, okay, about the English people they came across when they were there. See, so it's funny, they talk paganism. And one of the things they call paganism about us, because they look at people in West Africa and Central Africa and in tropics, and they say, look at them, they're naked. Wait a minute. Now, we're living in temperatures that are above 30 Celsius. Okay, it's hot, okay, day and night. We don't need to have heavy clothes on, right? See, so these are things we have to look at. The historians wrote about seeing Turkish women slaves. Yes, the European woman found her way in many of the Islamic kingdoms. You know that our brothers, the Fulani brothers, the Wolof brothers, and our Senike brothers went into Andalus as conquerors, as you heard me say in my class before. They made it with the Spanish woman. They created a whole new race of people they call Melungeon. The extensiveness of where the Black African Islamic soldiers who are now governors and so forth and so on, they had hundreds of women at their disposal, and they mated them. And that's why I said our brothers were busy there in Spain. They created a whole race of people because they were mating themselves. They were mating. They reported they had more than 100 children. They were mixed Fulani and Spanish, Senike and Spanish, Popular, all this, Wolof and everything. The brothers were busy in Spain from 711 to the 1400s. They were very busy. They created a race of people because of black father and white mother. In the United States, we know them as Melungeon people. We know them as mulatto. But the term that's used in that region was called Melungeon. It's very, very interesting. Scholars say there's not the priests know how to read. Scholars say more common, not. Yes, see, the hieroglyphics it's a science. If I brought this, I'm learning. I brought the alphabet. I don't know where my I'm gonna tell you something. It's difficult. It's difficult, and to draw the figures, it's not easy. Now, I'm not an artist, And how our brothers did this, I don't know. They had, it has to be a gift from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. See, but the scripts were deciphered, and it took the African scholar Obega and Diop, who deciphered the Kush Meroic script. It's them who translated it. I believe Culture Kemp started in Kush. Yes, it did, because we know them, because the Anu people went in and they were the first ones basically to live in Kemp. We know them as the Anu people. Remember the hymns of Ani? They used the designation for nationality as Ani, but their people were known as Anu. But what they called themselves were Ani. So you had a name of Kwesi Ani. If he's righteous and so forth and so on, they use the term Ani as a sign of respect, also designates the nationality and ethnic group. This is how they did business there in Kempt. Therefore, we cannot say that Ekna moved from paganism. They always use different forces. Yes, well, see, the Europeans now are jumping all on that. They're saying that he was still involved in paganism. Now, you got to understand something. When Akhenaten is what we know him in the Akan language, okay? Akhenaten actually was involved in monotheism. He was involved in that. But of course, if you try to compare that to Islam, you cannot, because they had different messages and there were still things allowed. Subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed certain things with all prophets. But when Prophet Muhammad did his prophethood, he stopped many different things that were allowed in many other prophets' time. That doesn't mean the prophets are wrong, no, because they were given commissions to, certain missions. Like Isa has a certain mission. John the Baptist had a certain mission. But the seal of all the prophets was Prophet Muhammad. He would seal all the laws and all of the sunnah of Allah and so forth and so on, and said this is the way we're going to practice that. So all the other things that were allowed in previous prophethoods in their times when they were prophets was now banished. They could not. See, so we cannot compare what Akhenaten, how he was doing, with that of Moses alayhi salam. Totally different. Cannot. Was the force of nature Akhenaten was pointing to, or force behind Aten? Yeah, and that is the apparent. Yes. Okay. The force of nature. Yes. Now, I don't want to get too much in that, because we got the old kingdom, and we'll get into where all the scholarship what made Egypt great in the old kingdom was that. But I won't get into that until I get to that segment. Okay, how you doing, my dear brother? Goose, sun, and dark counterparts. Okay, Sa, the source of the life. Okay, yes. Now, what language are you talking about, Gu? Because what language, if you still hear, my dear brother Victor, who was Gu? Because I want to know which dialect this was that you're talking about in the dark counterpart, Sa. Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Tell me which group that is, so then that way I can marry it up. Please, I hope you hear. Please give an answer to that. Who used the word Gu for sun? I'm not convinced that the so-called hieroglyphics have been translated properly. The language is dead, not spoken. Well, okay, now this is where if you listened to me earlier, it's not the case. The languages that are still spoken in West Africa are part of the hieroglyphics. That's why our African scholars got to finally, they were allowed to translate documents, and they found these African dialects. See, so those languages are still spoken today. See, so that part, no, I think Europeans have missed it. Yes, our experts said that Budge, who was the first translator, he did a damn good job of translating hieroglyphic, no doubt. But he had weaknesses in linguistics because he began to come across African names he didn't know how to pronounce. See, and he miswrote them and he misinterpreted those names until our African scholars got to him, then they knew what this meant. I give an example like Siri. Okay, Siri people, I talked with them yesterday in Senegal. We know that if you look at the hieroglyphics, they didn't know They don't know what Siri. They don't know what this. Okay. Siri means the caretakers of the temple. See, but they didn't realize that the Siri people, when they left from camp, they came to synagogue. They still kept the same, cultural traits. They didn't understand that. So this is why they were at a disadvantage. No, the Europeans want you to think that it was pagan because they don't want to admit we were the first ones to follow. Yes, we know that. Yes, it's true. Now everything is pagan, and so from so on. When they claimed that they were running the show, they talk about paganism. But now, since we've thrown them out, so to speak, and we've shown them to be a liar, they're coming out with everything is pagan. I ignore that. It translated properly. Yes, we have African scholars today talking about some of the translations was not good. You're right. And I remember Ben Jakinan, who's passed on, I think, a couple of years now, from Ethiopia. Originally, I think he was from Ethiopia. Yusuf Ben Jakinan, expert, good books. I read many of his books. He talks about the issue of that translation as well. He said that Budge made a lot of mistakes. And one was, again, Ra, because Budge named as a sun god. It was not. It was the worship of the person who created the sun. See, so there was a lot of mistakes made. Very interesting. Okay, long before Kemet. Yes, okay, long before Kemet. Okay, I don't know what you mean, my dear brother, on that. The common people say we live under, yes, and we shall return. Yes, this is the old worship that was there in Kemet. This is how Professor Dakwa of Ghana, when he came across hieroglyphics, he translated documents. He found the Akan people were involved in the first stages of the dynasties. He found Asa. He found that. And then he found the word that we know today is Israel in English, right? Israel. He found it Asra. He found all of that in the Khan and Ga and Ewe languages. Professor Dakwa, because he's an expert on languages from Nigeria, Togo, Benin, this type, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and so forth and so on. See, Sheikh Job was an expert in the corridor languages, like the Fulani people, the Mende, Mendinka, the Dogon, the Siri, the Sonike. He was expert in those languages. So we had experts that were, they showed out. Professor Banga was an expert in Eastern and Central and Southern African languages. The brothers kicked butt. When they got to these conferences, they kicked butt because the Europeans were talking about this and that. They said, no, this name belongs to the Somali people. This name here belongs to the Akan people. This name here belongs to the Siri people. This name here belongs to the Kemetic people. Here is their script that you just translate. This belongs to the Kemetic people. They blew them away. They blew them away, brothers and sisters. See, so as I study linguistics, I start studying behind these masters and I start studying their works. See, and this is how I got up to speed and whatnot. And yes, every language. Oh, okay. Good. Yes, and okay. Thank you, dear brother Victor, for explaining that, because I didn't know because Gu and Ga. Because yes, Gu, yes, son. Okay, now the Ewe language. Yes, we found the Ewe language in documents in the King's List talking about them being all the way up in the Middle East. We know that to be the case as well. Very interesting. I'll answer a few more, and I got to stop because I got to go pray. Christopher admits that the languages originated in African. Yes, and yes. These so-called languages were created in Africa. And bottom line, they weren't created in the Middle East. That's why we get on the modern day Jewish scientists, when we ask them, where in the hell are your documents that you say that form the Old Testament? Where are they? See, they can never furnish them because they don't have them. They said it was destroyed, this and that, and all that. The language weren't spoken. It's not true. I gave a class of that. They start talking about, to fool us more, they say, Aramaic. Aramaic was transposed by the Jewish scientists and Greeks and racist Europeans from Aramaic, right? Aramaic was actually Amharic because Ge'ez and Amharic almost the same languages. So we know that Aramaic is actually Amharic. They thought they were slick, but our African linguistic experts detected this because they began to see words and stuff. Said, wait a minute, this word you talking? This is called Aramaic. We know this to be Amharic in Ethiopia. Very interesting. What is Asa? Okay, Asa is the one name they use for God, and you know, Professor, excuse me for a minute for this, brothers and sisters, please get our brother's book here. He breaks down all of the stuff about the Central West African dialects. Okay, please get this. The Africans wrote about my professor here, Darkwa. Please get his book because he breaks down the stuff. He breaks down the Hausa names, Yoruba, the Igbo, Tiv, Ife, Akan, Ga, Ewe. All this stuff is broken down in his book. That's why I said you have to go to the African scholars in order to understand the hieroglyphics because it's them who broke down the hieroglyphics and proven that this is African dialects that was actually being used. So please go and get his book. You can get it online now. It's easy to get. Please get that. Starting to find evidence of Africans worshiping one supreme God. Oh, yes. Even the Europeans had parts of people who actually worship one God. All had it. The Asians, even Indians, the Amerindians, everybody had periods where they worshiped only one God and then they reverted back to polytheism. That's happened everywhere in the world. Is the Akan words Asa relate to Asa? I don't think so, my dear brother. I don't believe it is. But Professor Darkwa in his book wrote about this, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe it is not because I don't have a good working knowledge of the Akan dialects. Do you mean to tag you, brother? Okay, okay. So you guys are talking among yourselves. Not sure. Okay, and our brother Victor, to the Akan people and airways, Asa and Sa is a force behind the creation of the world and universe. Okay, now you explain that. Okay, I'm not sure about the first because I don't know what page. Boy, running out of time. I got it. I've got his book here. He talks about Asa. I got it. I got it here, but where is it at? I don't know. I got it. Because his book is near 300 pages long. He talks about Asa and how it was written in the hieroglyphics. Oh, I don't know which page it is, my dear brothers and sisters, here and whatnot. But if you get his book, he talks about. Okay, did I find it? Did I find it? Wait a minute. I'm not. No. Okay, that's not. No, it's not Asa. No, it's not there. I don't know where I have it marked, but because it's a lot of pages. No, I don't. No, I'm sorry, I don't have it. The page, but I'm not sure. Okay, I shouldn't say I know for sure, but I'm not sure to that. But I read about Asa in the Akan language, and he did give his spiel about this, but I'm not sure. So I shouldn't really give a definitive answer because I don't speak Akan and stuff. I read his book many times. I discussed it with him, especially back in 2000 when he first wrote the book, and he and I had lengthy conversations about this and whatnot and so on and everything. And this is why I'm saying, brothers and sisters, you have people who will not follow African scholars. You need to follow them because when you start talking about Kemp, you got to have African scholars. Why? Because it's them who can translate the documents, and because when the Europeans, that's where Budge had his problem because he could not figure out these dialects. When he got into the other higher dynasties, 16, 17, 18, all of a sudden there's Hausa, there's Ga, there's Yoruba, there's Fulani, all that start to appear. He didn't know how to translate that. See, so what they did, they took the names and made it to Greek. This is what because they didn't know. They just didn't know. They seen these names here. They didn't know what it meant. See, so that's why you have to go to the African scholars to get the correct information. And this is important, brothers and sisters. So anyway, I'm hoping today, brothers and sisters, that you guys got something out of this part. Now you understand why I said that Egypt is ours again, and how we got the hieroglyphics, and we got to the point where we know it's Africans. Our African scholars broke it down for us in their books. And one of them is this book here. Okay. And you have to have this in order. Professor Dakwa, his book, he breaks it down because he's a linguistic expert of the Akan, Ga, Ewe, Hausa, Igbo, Ife, Tiv. He has all working out all of these languages. He found these languages again in hieroglyphics, and he began to run with it. He said, whoa, wait a minute, this is ours. This is Akan. We start to find this out. No, this is Hausa. This is Yoruba. He broke it down in his book. It's something else. And when you pick it up to read it, you don't want to put it down. See, the first time I read it, I picked it up. I started reading it from cover to cover. I was reading because it was so fascinating, his discoveries. Okay, the Europeans bludgeoned the world into yeah, they did. And we're Africa, we're still sleeping, but we're starting to wake up. But too many of us are still asleep, and too many of us are still assisting them. And as long as we keep assisting them and letting them run us, we're going to have problems here in Africa. The Suppression doesn't want to bless us because we let these disbelievers like these come here to rule us. And he didn't say that. See, and this is, I don't want to get into that, but this is what got our ancient Kemetic brothers in trouble in Kemet. This relationship that we have today with the Tubab is what killed them in Kemet too. I give you that nugget. It killed Kemet, brothers and sisters. Their relationship with the Tubab killed them. And I have proof of that in the King's List. Their unwholesome relationships, just like we have unwholesome relationships with them today, and it's killed us here now in present times. We don't have employment. We have very little investment. Our education is low. We have 60% of our population in Africa is still illiterate under the guise of the Tubab. And then we ask Suppression to bless us. We have them to control us. This is what happened in Kemet. When they begin to allow them to do things, Kemet went down the wayside. Education went down. The morals went down. The system went down. The governance went down. There was more revolts. There was a lot of things going on because the Tubab came in and began to sow seeds of deceit among ethnic groups. And they began to, some said, hey, I want to get rich. So they start lining themselves with the Greek forces and the Romans and so forth and so on in order to take power. The same thing we have today, it happened 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. Same problems. In Africa, there's no evidence of polytheism except we have it, brothers, because if you look at in the Book of the Dead, we have some portions of polytheism in the 42 negative confessions. That's very interesting. You find this, I talked about that. I showed pictures of that weeks back about the 42 negative confessions in the Book of Dead. They have some portions in there that's polytheism related. But again, I'm waiting for our African brother who's translated the documents. He said Budge made a lot of mistakes. I'm waiting on him to decipher the 42 negative confessions. Because you see all this monotheism and suddenly you see polytheism. It doesn't make sense. But he said that Budge made a lot of mistakes. So I'm waiting for his book to come out. The Akan say they came from Kush. Yes. Okay, yes. The Akan, they came out, but the Akan were in the upper, they were in the lower Egypt as well, because they became kings. Yes, we believe all West Africans came from Kush, no doubt about that. And they developed dialects as the Kushites began to spread out, open up, clans began to operate. They became the Bamoun people. clans begin to come up. They become the other ethnic groups. This is what happened when people start to go. My son marries another woman in another place. He decides to take his family 6,000 kilometers away, right? He develops his own language and culture. But even though he's of me, he's no longer a Khan per se. He's now something else. See, so these things happen. The role, yes, I'll get more into that. Press like, okay, here, please read the translation. I recommend it's better. Okay, you give me, that's right, my dear brother. Thank you for giving us that information. And I'll try to look that up because there's a lot of our African scholars who critical of Budge and many of the other Europeans in their translations. Very critical of some of their translations. Say that the Christian spread, but they gave the word civilization. They positioned that yes, polytheism sprang up everywhere in the world. We have periods of that. We have Tawheed in Arabic, meaning monotheism, and then suddenly we go back to polytheism and so forth and so on. We've had that. Look what we have today. We have monotheism, and suddenly we're starting to go back to polytheism. Because when you say you're a Christian and you say you believe in the Trinity, what is that? That's polytheism. Jesus didn't say that. There's nowhere that Jesus said for you to have this, this, and this, and do this how they do. That's ridiculous. Jesus didn't do it, so why are you doing it? See, this is the contention that I would say. Okay, brothers and sisters, it's a long today. I'm glad that you guys showed up today. All you brothers that showed up, thank you very much. And I would also ask you, please subscribe to my station, pass this on, support your brother in his hard work, because this is not easy. I don't look at some document for 5 minutes. It usually takes me all day, as my wife can attest, because she wonder if I'm still living or not, because I'm so quiet and I'm reading, writing, and so forth. So, because it's my job to furnish this information to you, my dear brothers, as your elder, to get you the information right and give it to you, so that way you can get and start doing your studies and then pass it on to your children, so we can start doing our own history and get it right. This is important because we had our history so whitewashed for so many centuries. Now our brother scholars are starting to come forward to give this information. You should support us. You should support us. So that way you'll have that. And then that way you can pass it on to your children. This is important. I see my brother Victor has subscribed to me. Thank you very much, my dear brother Anjurama. Thank you very much, my dear brother, for supporting me by subscribing. I appreciate that. So my dear brothers, let me see. We got a couple more here. Would like to know she was in 19. How she know? I don't know what you mean by that, my dear brother. And the Greeks said that the Cushites were first to hold banquets for idols. Yeah, okay. You know, I took from, yes, but the Greeks took from us. We didn't take from them. We took later when they began to run Egypt, okay, and they start to have wars with us. We begin to take some of their foods and some of the words, and it's common sense. If you're living in Ghana and the Japanese begin to come to migrate, they bring their foods and culture. In time, in the Fante language, because they live around the Fante, there'll be Japanese words incorporated. This is normal. This is normal. When two cultures begin to come and they live in a certain vicinity, they begin to adopt each other's, some of their themes and words. Okay, you know what I mean? And that's normal. That's normal. So that is not unheard of. But the Greeks basically learned from us. We didn't learn from them, because it's them who came to our schools to learn. We didn't go to their schools. They came to our schools in Africa to learn, and they learned from us. And we gave them all the advances of medicine and mathematics, trigonometry, astrology, and all the other stuff. We did that. They learned from us. See, one more and that'll be it. Our brother says that through her investigation from the Greeks, that Indian history also works. The Indian history is also another sore spot. I don't want to get deep in that. You know what I mean? You know what's going on in the Indian subcontinent. Okay, we have a lot of racism directed at Africans. Okay, and we have Indians that are 4 times darker than I am, and they call themselves white. I don't want to get deep into that, but the Africans were there. We know that, and they were running India for a long period of times as sultans of India. We know that. But there's a lot of racism there. We have Africans who have lived there and gave horrible stories. And I saw one sister here 2 weeks ago who left there in tears after people who were 3 times darker than her were discriminated, saying you're black when they're 3 times darker than she was. So these are the type of things, we had these problems around the world where people disrespect us. We have people who are our people because the Indians are descendant from Africans as well. They mixed with others, and that's why they look the way they look. But they still kept their dark skin color, didn't they? It's not because they ate bananas or they ate curry that made them that way. They had to have heritage to be that way, right? Okay, and they didn't get that from the Europeans. The Europeans cannot come in from France, go into India and start dropping black and brown babies. Genetically impossible. They cannot. See? So how did the Indians get their color? Where did they get it from? They didn't get that from the Europeans, but they'll tell you that, but it's not the case. Even when they did mix with the Europeans, they still retained their color, didn't they? That means African heritage. They don't want to accept that. Okay, fair enough. Yes, okay. India called the mountains Kush. Aryans came and displaced. Yes, we know there were so many invasions into Kemp. I'll cover some of that in the other segment when we get into the dynasties, because what happened in dynasty in the King's List was a tragedy. When we put our trust in the Tubab, they killed us. And when we have brothers who betrayed their African brothers and they went along with the Greeks and the Romans to help them to invade the country, it killed us. And it killed Kemp. See, so by the time I would give you that, by the time the 26th dynasty, we're just about finished. We were just a shell now. Okay, and the Romans and Greeks destroyed us. They destroyed us, brothers and sisters. Bottom line, they destroyed us, and all of the blessings that Suppression gave us was gone. Don't you see that correlation today? We let the Tubab come in here and run things. Now look what has happened here in Africa. It's funny, isn't it? In the text, sacred text, warning us about being around them, but we don't listen, and we allow them to come around us. And excuse me, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't bless us, he curses us. He gives us things to say we're wrong. That happened 5,000 years ago too, when our brothers put trust in the Tubab, and we lost Egypt. We lost it. See. So with that said, my brothers and sisters, those who have not subscribed, please subscribe to my station. I greatly appreciate that. Until the next time, brothers and sisters, a couple of days, inshallah, bi'ifnillah, assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.